this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Welcome to part 3 of update 2 of our 2021 project orchids. And this is where we look at the 6 chosen Cattleya types. And it's a mixed bunch. Some are only just with us, but they're still all hanging in there. And in some cases there have been some improvements. Anyway, we'll get going with part 3. Normal sort of process for each plant, same plants as last time and the time before, in the same order. List of plants will be in the description, and basically we look at the still that was taken from the videos last time round and have a chat about that's where they were then. This is back in June, and what my hopes were and plans were for that particular plant through the rest of the growing season. And then we'll have a look at a video clip of what the plant looks like now, and well, we'll see where we got see where we got to. Did we actually achieve anything? Have plants gone uphill, downhill, or not done much at all? And we'll see how we go. So let's go in with part 3, the Cattleya types. Okay, first up then is the biggie. This is the Laelia purpurata variety striata. One I'd looked for quite some time before actually finding. And when we had this back in June, it was maturing its 2 latest growths, one off to the right with its back to us and one off to the left. And the bulbs themselves were a bit skinny. We didn't exactly have a very good root system, but we had a couple of active roots. But quite honestly, nowhere near a big enough root system to support a plant that big. So with no sheaths on either of the 2 growths, I wasn't expecting this to bloom from these growths. You never know with Cattleyas though, they can surprise you, but unfortunately purpuratas are quite predictable. No big sheath as the bulb matures, you probably ain't going to get any buds. That's just the way they go. But anyway, we had 2 new growths, which was good. We had a bit of root activity and a good set of leaves, so the potential for a strong plant, you know, and some blooms later down the line. So let's see how we got on with this one. Yeah, it's difficult to get far enough back to actually get this in. And as it is this big, unfortunately when I take the still for the final set of updates, which will be in December, I've got to have equipment in it because that's how big it is. Now on the surface this plant has done nothing in 3 months, but it actually has. It hasn't changed shape, and the 2 latest growths, that's this one with its back to us and this one facing us, neither have got a sheath, so they're not going to bloom. We're not going to get blooms on this time round, although I would expect to get blooms from the next 2 growths. What we have got is the start of some root activity, which is good because it lost a lot of its roots. Not all of them, but it lost quite a few with that bad bit of treatment that we did. It's affected a lot of my Cattleya types. But what has happened with this, which is not so obvious, is those 2 new growths have grown about another 3 or 4 inches in length, which doesn't show. But if you actually look over here, how much higher than the rest of the plant this one is. I don't think this one's grown quite so much, but this has actually grown on. So it hasn't changed shape, and it certainly hasn't got a sheath, but it has actually got longer. So effectively this is not going to do anything now until it decides to start some new growths. When that will be I don't know. Laelia purpurata, after blooming or after maturing its growths, it normally rests with its sheath and then starts its buds quite a few months later often. But without any sheaths this isn't going to bloom. So it's difficult to imagine what it's waiting for. But at some point down the line, those 2 new growths should push out the next set of new growths. And providing we've got some roots on the go, and those push on with some strength in them, the leaves behind it and the amount of the plant we've currently got will be enough for the next new growths to actually bloom. So we'll see how we go, but not much is going to happen with this now for some considerable time. We need another pair, or at least one, new growth, hopefully with a sheath, then we should get some buds. That's that one. Next up is one of these disasters that came from Jeff's and promptly rotted. No real active roots, quite a disaster, borderline going in the bin, and quite honestly it should have gone in the bin. But the reason it was kept was its name. It's the fact that it had green and big in it, and I don't have any green blooms in my collection. And I have seen some Cattleyas with very large, very attractive green blooms. So that's the only reason it was kept, basically. I mean, it's badly desiccated. It's got old tired roots that possibly can still hydrate and feed the plant a little bit, but with no leaves it certainly isn't going to get much. So it's weak, it has no inner strength, and the only hope for this was a new growth. Without a new growth it's pointless. It's like a broken pencil, pointless. But anyway, it's still with us. Let's see what it's like, now. Now this one's gone from a disaster, borderline being thrown out, to something that's got some hope. And the hope is here. Yeah? Against all odds, we've got quite a strong looking new growth coming out. It's making very, very slow progress though, because there's no reserves in this plant. We've got 3 totally desiccated bulbs with no leaves. So there's no greenery on this plant. The roots are old and tired, but they do still allow some hydration and food to get into the plant, but very, very little. There's no sign of any new roots anywhere. I mean, there could be some, I suppose, down in the pot, but I believe not. So what we've got is the old growing points that rotted, taken off, shooting out from farther back down the plant. This has had the hippie soap treatment, so there's not a scale in sight. Well, at the moment. They may be back. It seems to be working at the moment. Anyway, and we have a reasonably strong new growth for the state of the plant. It's making slow progress. Providing it does progress and produce, I can't remember whether it's a bifoliate or not, but it's either going to produce 1 or 2 leaves when it gets to that stage. And then it's got some greenery, it can start to photosynthesize again. Somewhere along between now and those leaves being fully open, we need some new roots. So we need some root activity. Then the progress of the plant will speed up. So at the moment, there is hope, and that's all I can say. It's still a tatty looking object that should have gone in the bin, but we're giving it a go. And the only reason this gets to stay is its name. With a name like Cat Green Power, it's got the word green in it, and then it's got big triple G. I'm expecting some very, very large green Cattleya blooms. And if it wasn't for that, then it wouldn't still be here. It would have gone a long time ago. So we're hanging on to it. It's going to carry on. Right, the Recchara Frances Fox, a notorious non-bloomer for a lot of people. It needs highlights. This is right up the top end of Cattleya type light, like some of the Laelias, up near the Vanda type light. I'm giving it the best light I can. It lives in the corner at the moment, so it gets strong light in from both sides. Yeah, so it gets the light for as long as I can give it through the day. It's matured some growths. I haven't had it long enough to know whether it's supposed to get sheaths or not, or whether the spike just pushes out of the leaf joint. It's difficult to tell. But at this particular point we had some root activity. We had a pretty good set of leaves and some maturing new growths, and no sign of any blooms. And because I haven't had it long enough, I don't know whether there is a wait. A lot of Cattleyas, they mature their pseudo bulbs and then they do nothing for some considerable time, and then at another part of their life cycle they start pushing out the spikes. Some Cattleyas push the spikes out straight away, But I don't know with this one. I haven't had it long enough. So it's coming into the growing season, in the middle of it, heading through the rest of the growing season with not much growing going on, because it's just matured its growths. So let's see what it's like in September then. Okay, so this one's doing okay. It's gone a bit mad with its root production, but that seems to have slowed up a bit now. It's got a good set of leaves on it, and latest growth, nice big fat plump one, as opposed to, you know, the others that are slightly desiccated. So it's okay. It's got a reputation of being a bit of a pig to get to bloom because of its high light requirement, but this is the latest growth, and it did for a while look as though it was going to push and possibly produce a spike, but I'm not so sure now. And as far as I'm concerned, you just wait and see. I don't think there are any signs of a spike pushing on, but then I haven't had the plant long enough to know whether there's quite a long pause. Let's get it round where the latest growth is, because that is the newest growth, the plump one. Yes, so when it produces its latest growth that's mature, and it's got this bump in the leaf, they've all got that, yeah? So this one hasn't bloomed, but they've all got that bump down in the leaf joint, and this one has too. But at some point that turns into a spike. It doesn't look like it's a plant that has a sheath, although it might be. So at the moment there are no signs of a spike pushing out on any of the leaves. However, I am very pleased with that latest new growth. That's pushed on nicely, nice and plump, nice leaf, and a good set of leaves, and a lot of root production, some of which is still growing. There are still some active root tips. So we've got more than a good root system there, a good set of green leaves, and the potential for it to bloom. But if it needs the really high light to push the blooms out, then it's probably not going to happen this year now, because our days are getting short, and therefore the light intensity is actually dropping down now. So rather than, you know, it would be better if it was in a position around about May time that it was capable of, at that point in its life cycle, producing a spike. As the light intensity gets brighter and brighter, that might actually trigger it. But at the moment, no sign of blooms, but a nice healthy plant. I'll live with that. Right, this one was one of the Schweiter order that I actually ordered myself rather than the presents that hitched a ride. I got this because I was really attracted to the blooms, the colour, size, shape, everything about them. So that's why I got it. Maybe one day we'll see those blooms for real. Anyway, didn't have a brilliant root system when I got it. There were signs of dehydration. The latest growth had twisted leaves, which are the top two leaves. You can see the twists. That's a sign of dehydration. And without a decent root system, that was understandable. In June, we had a nice new growth pushing out at the very front. It's the lowest pseudo bulb. You can see it's got purpley tinge. So that was new at the time, and there was some signs of root growth to go with it. Which would be good, because it needed a root system at this point in time. So we had progress. You know, we're coming into the growing season. It's growing. That's what it's supposed to do. How much of that it was going to do in the growing season, we'll have to move forward and have a look and see what it looks like in September. Spot the problem. Where's the black cloth gone? Some dummy filmed the wrong plant, didn't he? Just putting all the clips together on the computer, and obviously with the stills I have to do a soundtrack that goes with the still, because obviously it's just a photo, and that's what you see, the combined sort of joined up bit, and then the video clip follows on with what the plant looks like in September. I filmed the wrong plant, didn't I? So we'll come back and we'll film the right plant. We do. It's been a long day, let's put it down to that. And that's just an excuse, and it is an excuse as well. So our new growth that we had back in June has pushed on and matured. It has a sheath, there's no sign of any buds in that sheath, and it's now started another new growth. A growth up the back actually matured, but small, so not a full-size one. And it's gone mad with the old roots, so we've got a more than adequate root system now, a lot of which is aerial, but nonetheless, a lot of the ones that are aerial go through the moss before they poke out the end. So at least a portion of that root stays well hydrated when the moss is wet. So it's a combination of the two. This plant in future might have to be dunked to get it fully hydrated, because sometimes it's difficult with Cattleya roots to hydrate them by pouring water over them, if you see what I mean. You know, when it rains in the tropics, it doesn't rain for 30 seconds while the water goes over the roots. It rains for hours. So they're getting wetted over a much longer period. Anyway, it's progressing nicely. It's attached to its mount. It's happy up there. It was firmly attached with wire, so it wasn't going anywhere, but there's enough roots attached to the mount now I could take the wire off, but I often think there's no point, you know. So that's the progress on this one. We had a sheath on a growth here, that was already there when I got it, and there'd been a bit of dehydration because the leaves are slightly twisted on that growth, so that wasn't fully hydrating at the time. And then the growth that I've grown on, slightly smaller leaves, but no distortions, and with a sheath again. And you know, it might be one of those where the sheath sits there for 3 months and then the buds come out. It might be one of those where the sheath goes all brown and dry and then the buds come out. I don't know, I haven't had it long enough. But we do have yet another new growth pushing on. So if this one doesn't bloom, I highly suspect that one will. So this is progressing nicely, and with a name like this, I'm expecting some quite spectacular blooms when we get some, but possibly not on this latest growth, maybe on the next one. We'll see how we go. Cattleyas can surprise you. Now this little miniature hitched a ride in the Schweiter order. This was added in by my anonymous birthday present person. I hadn't heard of this one before. I wasn't happy with the mount, but I thought it can stay on there for now as it was growing. The roots weren't attaching, but then most of the roots on the plant were already there. So I don't know how long it had been on the mount to know whether the roots were ever going to attach to it or not. But it had pushed on a couple of new growths, one out to the right sort of halfway up and one out to the left. So we had growth and we had an active root system back in June. Normally with a Sophronitis, now Cattleya I know, you tend to get the buds inside the leaf. So as the leaf opens on the new growth, the buds are there, and then they grow on along with the size of the leaf, if you see what I mean. So no buds when the leaf opens probably means you're not going to get any buds on that particular growth. And that might not be true of all Sophronitis, but it's certainly true of a few that I know, including one I've got, the Cernua. So it was doing okay, you know. I was sort of happy with its progress so far, although I hadn't had it long. And all I could look forward to really was more of the same. More new growths, more new roots, and maybe some blooms down the line. Who knows? Right, so I can reasonably safely say that this is my smallest orchid. Tiny. This was a present. I didn't buy this myself. This sort of came with the Schweiter order for my birthday. But last time we looked at it, it was maturing some new growths. If this is going to bloom, as the growths open their leaves, the buds should be visible. It's that type of thing. It's one of the old Sophronitis types. And that didn't happen. And now it may still be a bit small to bloom, I don't know. Because I've never taken it off the mount, I do believe it is a single plant. So it is bulking up a bit. As I said, it's had several new growths since I got it. And what we've got now is 2 more new growths coming out on the left-hand side of the plant. They've only recently started. It's got a good root system. I'm still not happy with this mount, but I'll probably leave it on this mount now and think about it in the spring when it will probably put on a bigger spurt of growth, at which time the roots will, attach. All of these aerial roots here, if I mount it on a piece of cork bark, they're not going to attach. And most of the roots on here haven't attached to this mount. They don't seem to like it. Even here where it looks like they have attached, they're not attached. None of them are. So the plant is not attaching to this mount. And that's bad news, because a plant always grows better if roots are attached. So that'll be the goal for this one. Probably just let that carry on growing this year. It's okay, as I say, I don't like the mount, but it's sort of allowing it to grow okay. And as I plan on changing it, it might actually be a good thing that it's not attaching to it, because I won't have to tear all the roots off to get it off. But yeah, we've got a couple of new growths. There are some active root tips on it. And my longer term plan, well out at the end of this project, is to actually get that on a piece of cork where new roots will attach, and it can grow on from there. But as long as it's pushing out new growths, then it's doing okay. It will be nice one day to see the blooms on this. Non-bloomer for me so far. It's relatively, it's a young plant, I mean, I know it's a miniature, but just the physical number of bulbs and leaves on it, it is a youngish plant, so it may not be mature enough to bloom yet, who knows. Anyway, it's doing okay. I'm quite pleased with that little one. Now, back in June, what on earth this was still doing with me and not in the bin, I really don't know. And really, it's that top right hand corner. If it wasn't for those blooms, the fragrance, the coloration, the fact that they go through a colour change over a period of time, the blooms had a lot going for it, the plant didn't. It had been sat there on that moss already for some considerable time, with no signs of new growths and no signs of roots. However, the leaves hadn't dropped. So it wasn't dead, if you see what I mean. Although there was no active growth, it wasn't dead. And the fact that it was just sat in that pot and not in my way is the only reason it was still there in June. And I think back in the update 1, when I talked about BC Maikai, I hinted that it may not be with us when we get to September. Well, the fact that I'm filming it, obviously it is still with us in September. However, it was a real iffy plant. It borderline being thrown out, borderline is it worth keeping, blah blah blah. And all I can do really is say, well, let's see what happened and let's see what we've still got in September, if anything at all. And to finish up with, we have a success story. This is my BC Maikai that spent an awful long time sat on some damp moss in an opaque pot, quite deep pot, to actually keep the humidity base around it going. And it sat there and did nothing for many, many, many months. If it had been in my way, it would have been in the bin an awful long time ago. And then out of nowhere, there were little signs of greenery appearing. And the first one was this little tiny growth here, which isn't going to grow. That's going to stay as it is. But over here, we've got new growths now. They're pushing on. And they're also producing new roots. So as soon as those new growths started to appear, I thought, right, we need to get that in a position where it can stay for quite a long time. And rather than putting it in a pot, because it didn't do so well in the pot last time after all, I thought we'll give it a go on a mount. So it's been mounted. Roots are pushing down through the moss, through the sort of old base, and new growths are pushing on. These new growths may not reach full size. It's still a weak plant at the end of the day, but nonetheless it's progress, and it's what I call good progress, in as much as the plant is now going to be a success and it will get to bloom again. Maybe not on this little set of new growths, but certainly on the next set. It is, or was, a blooming sized plant originally anyway. But yeah, it's coming on quite nicely. I'm very pleased with the progress on this, especially as it came so close to being thrown out, a lot more than once. At one point, it actually got as far as the dining room table, which is where I collect things together to have a chuck out, clean the pots up and all that sort of thing and get rid of the rubbish. It got that far, and then it just got brought back in here on the grounds it wasn't in the way. And now it's growing. I'm quite happy that we've got some nice new growths pushing on, and some roots to go with them. A combination of those two, some nice green fresh leaves to photosynthesize, some new roots to help hydrate and feed the thing. It's going to pull on okay now, because when it's growing well, it's quite a vigorous grower, this plant. So we'll hopefully get it going again and see those marvellous blooms yet again. So that's that one. Okay, so that's part 3 done. I did say it was a bit of a motley crew, but there's some recoveries going on in amongst those, as opposed to what they looked like last time round. And yeah, so that's part 3 done. Part 4 is endearingly known as the others because it's an assortment of genera. So there's bits and pieces from around the rest of the collection in that particular one. And there's a plant gone missing. We're down to 5. So something's actually gone. So we'll find out what that is when I do part 4, which will be next week sometime when I get round to it. As far as this weekend goes, it's Thursday today. I'm actually posting this Friday morning so that it can be Friday's video, because I'm going to be busy on Friday doing other things. I won't have time to film. Saturday I'm at the show, so I'll be filming at the show, but I won't be able to put those clips together till at least when I get home. Whether I'll have time to get something posted Saturday evening, I doubt it. After a long day like that, I'll probably have had enough. Sunday should be the Sunday chat, and at the moment I plan to do that, which means the clips from the show will be on Monday. So we'll go from there, see what happens. Who knows, maybe we'll have some new blooms or something to look at. The observant of you will be able to see something just over the top of these Vandas, which might be of interest. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.